The massive doors of the Galactic Council's judgment chamber opened with a deep rumble that seemed to shake the very fabric of space itself. Ambassador David Kane stepped through the threshold, his simple black diplomatic uniform a stark contrast to the ornate robes and biomechanical armor of the alien representatives who filled the vast amphitheater before him. The chamber stretched impossibly high, its curved walls lined with viewing platforms that housed delegates from over 300 species. Crystalline formations jutted from the ceiling like frozen lightning, each one pulsing with energy that translated thousands of alien languages into comprehensible communication. The air itself hummed with power, making Kane's human nervous system tingle with each breath. At the center of this cosmic courthouse stood a single chair, clearly meant for him. Around it, in concentric circles, sat the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Kane recognized some from the briefings Earth's intelligence services had provided: the reptilian saurians with their razor-sharp intellects, the energy-based luminari who existed as pure thought-given form, and the massive insectoid hive queens whose collective consciousness controlled entire star systems. Supreme Chancellor Vrex, a towering being whose multiple arms ended in manipulator claws that could crush starship hulls, rose from his throne-like seat. His voice boomed through the chamber's translation matrix, reaching every corner of the vast space. Human representative of the planet called Earth, you stand before the Galactic Council to answer for crimes that threaten the very foundation of interstellar civilization. Your species has been observed for exactly 43 standard cycles since you achieved primitive spaceflight. In that brief time, you have somehow managed to destabilize regions of space that have been peaceful for millennia. Kane walked calmly to the designated chair, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. He did not sit. Instead, he stood beside the chair and looked up at the assembled delegates with a slight smile that somehow managed to be both respectful and unsettling. Honored members of the Galactic Council, Kane began, his voice carrying clearly despite its quiet tone. I appreciate the opportunity to address this august body. However, I believe there may be some misunderstanding about the timeline you mentioned. A ripple of what might have been laughter passed through the alien delegates. Counselor Zephys, whose crystalline form reflected light in patterns that served as her species' primary form of communication, spoke next. Misunderstanding? Human, our monitoring stations have observed your homeworld since your ancestors first discovered fire. We have comprehensive records of your technological development. 43 cycles ago, you launched your first crewed vessels beyond your planetary atmosphere. This is documented fact. Kane nodded thoughtfully. Your monitoring stations. Yes, we're quite familiar with those. The one hidden in the asteroid belt between what you call the fourth and fifth planets of our system was particularly well designed. We've been feeding it carefully selected information for quite some time. The chamber erupted in confused murmurs. Supreme Chancellor Vrex's bioluminescent patches flared with irritation. Impossible. Our stealth technology is beyond your species' ability to detect, let alone manipulate. That's what we wanted you to believe, Kane replied calmly. The question you should be asking is not how we detected your monitoring station, but why we chose to let you discover certain activities while keeping others hidden. Counselor Threx of the warrior caste, whose species had conquered 17 star systems through pure military might, leaned forward on his platform. What activities? Human, your species has barely mastered travel within your own star system. What could you possibly hide from the combined surveillance capabilities of the Galactic Council? Kane reached into his jacket and withdrew a small device that looked remarkably like an ordinary Earth tablet. The moment it activated, every scanning system in the chamber went haywire. Energy readings spiked and crashed in impossible patterns, while the translation matrix struggled to process data streams that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. 3 standard cycles ago, Kane said conversationally, as if the technological chaos around him was perfectly normal, the pirate fleet known as the Blood Tide Syndicate disappeared from their base in the Outer Rim territories. Your records show this as an internal power struggle that resulted in their mutual destruction. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably. The Blood Tide Syndicate had indeed vanished, leaving behind only empty space where their massive fortress ships had once prowled the trade routes. 2 cycles ago, the slave markets of Zerion went dark. Again, your analysts concluded this was due to a cascade failure in their power systems, triggered by overextension of their operations. More uncomfortable shifting. The Xerion slave markets had been a persistent problem for the Council, operating just outside their jurisdiction and growing bolder with each successful raid on civilized worlds. One cycle ago, the death cult of Mortius simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not defeated in battle, they just stopped existing. Your investigation teams found no trace of what had once been a fleet of 10,000 fanatics determined to bring about the end of all organic life. The chamber had grown deadly quiet. These were not random criminals Kane was naming. These were some of the most dangerous threats the galaxy had faced in recent memory. Threats that had somehow been eliminated without any of the major powers taking credit for the action. The question, Kane continued, his tablet now displaying star charts that shouldn't have been possible for a primitive species to possess, is not whether humanity is responsible for these disappearances. The question is how many other problems we've solved, without bothering to inform the Council. Supreme Chancellor Vrex's multiple arms gestured frantically as he attempted to access security protocols that suddenly refused to respond to his commands. Security breach. How is he interfacing with our systems? He's not, came a new voice from the chamber's highest observation platform. I am. Every head turned upward to see a figure that appeared to be another human, but something about her presence made the air itself seem to bend around her. She wore the same simple diplomatic uniform as Kane, but reality seemed to ripple wherever her gaze fell. Allow me to introduce Agent Lisa Morgan, Kane said pleasantly. She's been observing this council for the past 15 standard cycles, serving in various advisory roles to several of your member species. I believe some of you know her as Strategic Analyst Velkara of the Dominion Intelligence Corps. The Dominion delegates turned as one to stare at their most trusted strategic advisor, whose form was now clearly shifting between human and the reptilian features they had known for over a decade. Others, Kane continued, might recognize her as trade negotiator Zendali of the Commercial Federation, or perhaps as military liaison Korthak of the Hegemony War Council. The implications hit the chamber like a physical blow. If humans had been infiltrating the highest levels of galactic government for over a decade, then everything the Council thought they knew about the balance of power was wrong. Kane finally took his seat, crossing his legs casually as if he were attending a pleasant social gathering, rather than facing charges that could result in his species' destruction. Now then, he said with that same unsettling smile, shall we discuss what humanity really wants from this council? The fate of galactic civilization hung in the balance, and nobody in the chamber had any idea what humanity's true capabilities might be. The trial was just beginning. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in absolute chaos. Emergency protocols activated throughout the massive station as delegates from hundreds of worlds demanded answers about the extent of human infiltration. Security sweeps revealed the impossible truth. Nearly a quarter of all trusted advisors, analysts, and liaison officers across the galaxy's major powers were either human or working under human direction. Admiral Rex Corzon of the Combined Fleet Command stood at the central podium, his cybernetic implants flickering with stress patterns as he delivered his report. The veteran commander had fought in 3 galactic wars and never showed fear, but today his hands shook as he accessed the classified files. Honored delegates, he began, his mechanical voice carrying across the silent chamber. Our investigation into human activities has revealed a scope of infiltration that defies all understanding of their technological capabilities. In the past 6 hours, we have identified human operatives in positions of critical importance across 17 major civilizations. The holographic display above the chamber showed a 3-dimensional map of known space, with red indicators marking the locations where human infiltrators had been discovered. The pattern was staggering. Every major trade route, military installation, and political center was compromised. The individual known as Agent Morgan appears to have been active under dozens of identities across multiple species. Admiral Corzon continued. Our analysis suggests she has been directly involved in the negotiation of at least 47 major treaties and trade agreements over the past 15 cycles. Counselor Nexus of the Techno Collective, whose species existed as pure digital consciousness, materialized in the chamber's data stream. How is this possible? Our bioscanners, genetic analyzers, and consciousness probes should have detected any deception of this magnitude. Ambassador Kane, still seated calmly in the defendant's chair, raised his hand politely. If I may address the counselor's question, your detection systems work perfectly when they're actually functioning as designed. What do you mean? Supreme, Chancellor Vrex demanded, his bioluminescent patches flashing in patterns that indicated extreme agitation. For the past 20 cycles, every major technological upgrade to Council security systems has been designed by Terra Dynamics Corporation, Kane explained. I believe you're familiar with the company. They've provided everything from quantum encryption protocols to biosignature analysis software. The silence that followed was deafening. Terra Dynamics was indeed known throughout the galaxy as one of the most reliable technology firms, having won countless contracts based on their innovative solutions and competitive pricing. Terra Dynamics, Kane continued pleasantly, is headquartered on Luna, what you know as Earth's moon. It was established 37 standard cycles ago by a partnership between human engineers and our non-corporeal allies. Every security system protecting this chamber was built to our specifications. Counselor Zephas's crystalline form pulsed with agitation. You're claiming that humanity has controlled galactic security infrastructure for nearly 4 decades? Controlled is such an ugly word, Agent Morgan interjected from her position on the observation platform. We prefer maintained. After all, we've prevented 17 attempted coups, 32 assassination plots, and at least 6 attempts at genocidal warfare. The galaxy has been remarkably peaceful under our stewardship. The delegates erupted in angry protests, but Admiral Corzon's voice cut through the chaos. The investigation has revealed more disturbing evidence. Analysis of major galactic events over the past 4 decades shows patterns that suggest direct human intervention in matters previously attributed to natural causes or random events. The holographic display shifted to show a timeline of galactic history, highlighting incidents that had shaped the current political landscape. Each event was marked with probability calculations that made the assembled delegates' blood run cold. The Hegemony-Dominion War ended after exactly 18 months when both sides' supply lines were simultaneously disrupted by what appeared to be random pirate attacks, Admiral Corzon reported. The probability of such coordinated strikes occurring naturally is less than 1 in 4 billion. The Great Trade Collapse that led to the formation of the Commercial Federation began when 47 different shipping companies suddenly experienced identical system failures, he continued. Each failure occurred at precisely the moment needed to create maximum economic disruption while avoiding actual loss of life. The plague of madness that swept through the warrior caste territories was cured by a mysterious remedy that appeared simultaneously on 18 different worlds, delivered by traders who vanished without trace once the medicine was distributed. With each revelation, the scope of human manipulation became clearer. Not conquest through force, but guidance through careful intervention. Not domination, but management. Counselor Threx's warrior pride struggled with the implications. You have been treating us like children who cannot manage their own affairs. Not children, Kane corrected gently. Adolescents. Your species have achieved remarkable technological advancement, but your social and political development has lagged behind. Left to your own devices, you would have destroyed yourselves within another century. You have no right to make such decisions for sovereign civilizations. Supreme Chancellor Vrex's multiple arms gestured furiously, his bioluminescent patches now cycling through the full spectrum of his species' emotional range. Agent Morgan descended from the observation platform, moving with a fluid grace that seemed to bend the laws of physics around her. As she walked, her form solidified into something that was recognizably human but clearly enhanced beyond normal biological limitations. We didn't make these decisions lightly, she said, her voice carrying harmonics that bypassed the translation matrix and spoke directly to the consciousness of each listener. The entity you knew as strategic analyst Velkara spent 12 cycles studying Dominion culture, learning your strengths and weaknesses, understanding what interventions would preserve your civilization's best qualities while preventing its self-destructive tendencies. The trade negotiator Zendali lived among the Commercial Federation for 8 cycles, experiencing their values firsthand, building relationships based on genuine respect and understanding. Every decision was made with deep knowledge of the cultures involved. The chamber's atmosphere changed as Agent Morgan's enhanced presence made itself fully known. Several delegates found their consciousness expanded momentarily, allowing them to perceive reality from a broader perspective, seeing not just their own species' concerns but the interconnected web of cause and effect that linked all galactic civilization. "This is what we offer," Morgan continued. "Not domination but partnership. Not control but guidance toward a future where the galaxy's potential can be fully realized without the constant threat of self-destruction." Counselor Nexus's digital form flickered as his consciousness processed the implications. The technology required for such interventions suggests capabilities far beyond what our intelligence estimates indicated for humanity. "What are you?" Kane stood from his chair, his movement somehow more graceful than it had been moments before. "We are what your species could become, given time and proper guidance. Humanity encountered beings of transcendent consciousness 49 cycles ago, when our first deep space exploration vessel ventured beyond the edge of your monitoring network. We were offered a choice: remain as we were, struggling with our limitations and inevitable self-destruction, or accept enhancement and become caretakers of consciousness throughout the galaxy." The holographic display shifted again, showing star charts that extended far beyond the known boundaries of galactic civilization. Vast regions of space that had been considered empty or unexplored were revealed to be teeming with activity, human activity. "The galaxy you know represents less than 12% of inhabited space," Kane explained. "The rest has been under human protection for the past 30 cycles, developing naturally while shielded from the conflicts that have plagued your region of space. We come before this council not as conquerors or manipulators, but as gardeners tending a vast ecosystem of consciousness. The question now is whether you choose to join that ecosystem willingly, or whether you prefer the illusion of independence, while remaining unaware of the forces that have been protecting you all along." The trial had become something far more significant than anyone had anticipated, a choice between evolution and extinction for galactic civilization itself. The revelation that most of known space existed under human protection sent shockwaves through the assembled delegates. Emergency communications flooded the chamber as representatives attempted to contact their home governments, only to discover that their quantum communication networks were experiencing mysterious delays. Every message was going through, but responses were taking far longer than the instantaneous communication they had grown accustomed to. Dr. Elena Vasquez materialized in the chamber through what appeared to be solid matter, stepping through the crystalline wall as if it were made of water. Unlike the other human representatives, she wore robes that seemed to be cut from starlight itself, fabric that shifted and flowed with patterns that hurt to look at directly. "Forgive the interruption," she said, her voice carrying the weight of infinite patience, "but I felt it was time to address the Council's growing concerns about communication delays." Supreme, Chancellor Vrex's bioluminescent patches had cycled through his entire emotional spectrum, and were now pulsing in patterns that indicated system overload. "Who are you? How many more of your kind are hidden among us?" "I am Dr. Elena Vasquez, and I have the honor of serving as liaison between humanity and the Transcendent Collective, the beings who first offered us the choice between limitation and evolution." As she spoke, the chamber itself seemed to respond to her presence, the crystalline formations growing brighter and more complex. "Your communication delays are not technical malfunctions," Dr. Vasquez continued. "They are a courtesy, giving your home governments time to process the information they are receiving from sources they have trusted for decades." The holographic display shifted to show real-time communication streams flowing throughout known space. Each stream was coded by color, and the delegates watched in growing horror as they realized that the vast majority of communications were colored blue, indicating human or human-allied sources. For example, Dr. Vasquez gestured to specific data streams. "The Dominion High Command is currently receiving detailed reports from what they believe to be 47 different intelligence sources scattered across 18 star systems. In reality, those reports are all being compiled by a single, enhanced human consciousness that has been monitoring Dominion space for the past 2 decades. Counselor, Threx's warrior instincts finally overcame his shock. "This is an act of war. You have infiltrated and compromised every major civilization in the galaxy. War? Dr. Vasquez tilted her head with an expression of genuine confusion. Counselor, when was the last time your species experienced a military conflict that lasted longer than 6 standard months? The question stopped Threx cold. His people were legendary warriors, their culture built around the concept of honorable combat. Yet he couldn't remember a single prolonged conflict in recent memory. The Hegemony Federation border dispute of 15 cycles ago, Admiral Corzin said slowly, his cybernetic implants accessing historical records. It ended when both sides' fleets were simultaneously recalled due to urgent supply shortages. The Great Crusade of the Purification Cult, added Counselor Nexus, his digital consciousness running rapid calculations, terminated after only 4 months when their leadership mysteriously abandoned their ships and disappeared into uncharted space. The merchant wars that should have devastated the commercial Federation's territory, Counselor Zephas's crystalline form pulsed with realization, ended before they began when key trade routes were suddenly blocked by what appeared to be natural gravitational anomalies. Dr. Vasquez nodded approvingly. You begin to see the pattern. For the past 40 cycles, humanity has been quietly preventing conflicts that would have cost billions of lives and destabilized entire regions of space. We have been your guardians, whether you knew it or not. The chamber fell silent as the magnitude of this revelation sank in. Every delegate was mentally reviewing the history of their civilization, looking for signs of the invisible hand that had been guiding galactic events. Agent Morgan stepped forward, her enhanced form now clearly visible to all present. The time for subtlety has passed. The galaxy stands at a crossroads, and the choice must be made consciously rather than through passive acceptance of our protection. What choice? Supreme Chancellor Vrex demanded, though his aggressive posturing had given way to something closer to desperation. Ambassador Kane moved to the center of the chamber, and as he did, his human appearance began to shift, not dramatically, but in subtle ways that revealed the enhancements that lay beneath. His eyes reflected light in patterns that suggested perception across multiple spectra. His movements carried the fluid grace of someone operating under different physical laws, and his presence seemed to occupy more space than his physical form should allow. The choice between evolution and stagnation, Kane explained. Between joining the community of transcendent consciousness or remaining locked in the cycle of conflict that has defined galactic civilization for millennia. The holographic display changed again, this time showing not star charts but something far more complex, a visualization of consciousness itself. Flowing networks of thought and awareness that connected minds across vast distances, creating a living web of intelligence that spanned dimensions. This is what we have become, Dr. Vasquez said, her form beginning to phase between dimensions as she spoke. Not gods, not conquerors, but gardeners of consciousness. We tend the growth of awareness throughout the galaxy, protecting developing civilizations while offering advanced species the opportunity to transcend their limitations. Counselor Nexus's digital consciousness attempted to interface with the consciousness network display, only to recoil in shock. The processing requirements for such a network are beyond theoretical possibility. No known technology could support awareness on this scale, which is why transcendence requires abandoning the assumption that consciousness is limited by technology, Agent Morgan replied. The beings who offered humanity this gift exist beyond the need for mechanical devices or artificial enhancement. They are consciousness in its purest form, unbound by physical constraints. The chamber began to fill with a low harmonic that seemed to emanate from the structure itself. As the sound grew stronger, several delegates experienced moments of expanded awareness, brief glimpses of what existence might be like with their consciousness, unshackled from the limitations of individual perception. The transcendent collective has been observing galactic civilization for 10,000 cycles, Dr. Vasquez continued, her voice now seeming to come from multiple locations simultaneously. They have watched species after species achieve technological advancement, only to destroy themselves through competition, territorial expansion, and the inability to see beyond their own immediate interests. Humanity was selected not because we were technologically superior or inherently peaceful, but because our species showed the capacity for moral evolution. When faced with the choice between power and responsibility, we chose responsibility. Admiral Corzon's cybernetic systems were struggling to process the information streaming through the chamber. You're claiming that consciousness itself can exist without physical substrate? That awareness can transcend the need for biological or mechanical support? I'm not claiming it, Dr. Vasquez replied with infinite patience. I'm demonstrating it. As she spoke, her physical form began to dissolve, but her presence in the chamber grew stronger rather than weaker. The delegates could see her, not with their eyes, but with a deeper perception that bypassed sensory organs entirely. She existed as pure awareness, consciousness unbound by the limitations of matter. This is the gift offered to all species when they reach sufficient maturity, she explained, her voice now coming from everywhere and nowhere. The opportunity to transcend physical existence and join the infinite community of evolved consciousness. But transcendence cannot be forced or granted carelessly. It requires the willing abandonment of everything that currently defines your species' identity. Your bodies, your technologies, your assumptions about the nature of reality itself. The harmonic in the chamber grew stronger, and with it came a choice that each delegate could feel forming in their consciousness. Not words or concepts, but a direct perception of two possible futures. Evolution into something unimaginably greater, or continuation of existence as they had always known it. The trial had become a transformation, and the verdict would reshape the galaxy forever. The chamber fell into an oppressive silence as each delegate struggled with the impossible choice before them. Some closed their eyes, attempting to shut out the visions of transcendence that flickered at the edges of their consciousness. Others leaned forward, drawn to the promise of evolution beyond their species' current limitations. All felt the weight of a decision that would affect not just themselves, but every member of their civilization. Commander Jake Morrison stepped through the chamber's quantum barrier, his appearance marking him as distinctly different from the other human representatives. Where they had shown signs of enhancement and evolution, Morrison looked entirely baseline human until he began to speak, and reality itself seemed to listen. Honored delegates, Morrison said, his voice carrying across dimensions rather than through air. I understand the magnitude of what we're asking. 3 cycles ago, I was a simple military officer serving on a border patrol vessel. I thought the greatest challenge facing humanity was managing trade disputes with the outer colonies. The holographic display shifted to show Morrison's service record, decades, of unremarkable duty on the far edges of human space, fighting small-scale pirate raids and responding to distress calls from civilian vessels. Then I encountered a derelict ship drifting in what we thought was empty space, Morrison continued. The vessel was unlike anything in our databases, composed of materials that shouldn't exist, powered by energy sources that violated known physics. Inside, I found the first evidence of the transcendent collective. The display showed images of the alien vessel, not built so much as grown, its organic curves suggesting intelligence beyond mechanical construction. The interior was filled with chambers that seemed to extend into dimensions the human eye couldn't process. The collective had been watching humanity's development for far longer than we imagined, Morrison explained. They had observed our wars, our achievements, our capacity for both cruelty and compassion. What interested them was not our technology or our military might, but our ability to change. Counselor Zephas's crystalline form pulsed with uncertainty. Change how? What makes humanity special among the countless species they must have encountered? Morrison's form began to shift, revealing the transcendent nature that lay beneath his human appearance. We were the first species they encountered that showed consistent moral progress over time. Most civilizations reach a plateau. They develop advanced technology, establish interstellar governments, then stagnate for millennia. Their values, their social structures, their understanding of consciousness itself remains essentially unchanged. Humanity was different. In the span of a few centuries, we evolved from tribal warfare to global cooperation. We learned to see beyond the boundaries of race, nationality, and species. We developed the capacity to sacrifice immediate advantage for long-term benefit. The chamber's harmonic deepened, and several delegates gasped as they experienced brief moments of expanded consciousness, glimpses of how their own species appeared from the perspective of transcendent awareness. The collective offered us a choice, Morrison continued, his voice now carrying the patience of millennia. We could accept their gift and join the community of evolved consciousness, or we could continue developing naturally while being protected from external threats. Admiral Corzon's cybernetic implants flickered as they struggled to process the implications. What percentage of humanity accepted transcendence? Initially, less than 1%, Morrison replied honestly. Transcendence requires abandoning everything that defines individual existence. Most humans chose to remain as they were, living under the protection of those who had evolved beyond physical form. But over time, as the transcended humans demonstrated the possibilities that evolution offered, more chose to make the transition. Today, approximately 30% of human consciousness exists in transcendent form, while 70% remains embodied but enhanced. Dr. Vasquez's consciousness manifested more solidly, taking on a form that was recognizably human, but clearly operating under different physical laws. The process is gradual and reversible. No one is forced to transcend permanently. Many humans spend time in both states, serving as bridges between dimensional levels of existence. The revelation that transcendence wasn't a one-way transformation changed the atmosphere in the chamber. Several delegates who had been recoiling from the choice began to reconsider. Supreme Chancellor Vrex's multiple arms gestured in patterns that indicated deep contemplation. Those who remain embodied, what becomes of them? Are they diminished in comparison to the transcended? Not diminished, Agent Morgan replied, her enhanced form demonstrating the possibilities of partial evolution. Enhanced, protected, free to develop their consciousness at whatever pace feels natural. The transcended serve as guardians and guides, but they do not rule over those who choose embodied existence. The holographic display shifted again, showing worlds throughout human space where both transcended and embodied consciousnesses coexisted, cities that existed simultaneously in multiple dimensions, technologies that responded to thought rather than manual control, societies that had eliminated conflict through expanded awareness while maintaining individual creativity and growth. This is what we offer the galaxy, Morrison announced, his presence now clearly spanning multiple dimensional levels. Not conquest, not forced evolution, but the opportunity to choose your species, destiny with full knowledge of the consequences. Counselor, Threx's warrior pride struggled with concepts that transcended his culture's understanding of strength and honor. What of those who choose neither path? Those who reject both transcendence and human protection? The chamber's temperature seemed to drop as Morrison's expression grew somber. They are allowed to pursue their chosen path without interference. However, they are also cut off from the protection that has been shielding them from external threats. What external threats? Counselor Nexus demanded, his digital consciousness running rapid threat. Assessments that return no. Significant dangers in known space. Dr. Vasquez's transcendent awareness manifested. Images that made several delegates lose consciousness from shock. Vast entities that existed in the spaces between galaxies. Intelligences so alien that contact with them drove most biological minds to madness. Cosmic predators that fed on consciousness itself, consuming entire civilizations before moving on to their next meal. The galaxy, you know, exists within a protective barrier maintained by the Transcendent Collective, she explained gently. This barrier has been in place for over 8,000 cycles, shielding developing civilizations from threats that your current level of consciousness cannot even perceive. Species that reject both evolution and protection are relocated outside this barrier, Morrison added. They are given worlds of their own, resources to maintain their chosen lifestyle and the freedom to develop according to their preferences. But they are also exposed to the true nature of existence beyond the protected zone. The implications were staggering. The peaceful galaxy that the Council governed was essentially a nursery, protected from cosmic forces that would destroy any civilization not operating at transcendent levels of awareness. How many species have chosen rejection? Admiral Corzon asked, though part of him already dreaded the answer. 47 species over the past millennium, Morrison replied sadly. Most realized their mistake within a few centuries and requested readmission to the protected zone. We always welcome them back, but 11 species chose to maintain their independence even after experiencing the true dangers of unprotected space. What happened to them? Counselor Zephys whispered. They learned why protection was necessary, Dr. Vasquez answered, her transcendent consciousness radiating infinite sorrow. But consciousness is eternal, even when biological form is consumed. Their awareness continues in forms that are different from what they once were. The chamber filled with the weight of cosmic truth as each delegate grappled with a choice that would define not just their own fate, but the destiny of their entire species. The trial had become a graduation ceremony, and the universe itself was waiting for their answer. The moment of choice arrived not as a single instant, but as a wave of consciousness that swept through the chamber, touching each delegate's awareness with the gentle pressure of infinite possibility. Some embraced the expansion immediately, their consciousness flowing outward to touch the vast network of transcendent awareness that connected every evolved being in the galaxy. Others held back, choosing to observe before committing to transformation. Counselor Zephys was the first to speak after the wave passed, her crystalline form now pulsing with new patterns of light that spoke directly to consciousness, rather than requiring translation. I can see the connections now. Every thought, every decision, every moment of suffering or joy rippling outward through dimensions we never imagined existed. Her awareness had expanded to encompass not just her own species but the entire web of consciousness that linked all thinking beings. For the first time, she could perceive how her civilization's actions affected others, how their pursuit of technological advancement had inadvertently caused suffering in species they had never encountered. Supreme Chancellor Vrex remained rooted in his physical form, but his bioluminescent patches now displayed patterns of impossible complexity. The weight of responsibility is overwhelming. To know that every decision affects consciousness throughout the galaxy, how do you bear such knowledge? Commander Morrison, his transcendent nature now fully revealed, smiled with infinite compassion. By understanding that knowledge is the first step toward wisdom, for millennia, your species made decisions based on incomplete information. Now you can see the full consequences of each choice. Admiral Corzon's cybernetic systems had evolved during the expansion, his mechanical components now integrated with biological consciousness in ways that transcended the distinction between organic and artificial. The military conflicts we fought, the territorial disputes we considered vital. From this perspective, they seem like children squabbling over toys while unaware of the larger world around them. Not children, Dr. Vasquez corrected gently, her consciousness manifesting as a presence that existed simultaneously in the chamber and across multiple dimensions. Adolescents. Your species had achieved remarkable technological development, but hadn't yet learned to see beyond immediate self-interest. Adolescence is a necessary stage in consciousness development. The chamber itself had transformed during the expansion, its crystalline walls now revealing their true nature as nodes in a vast communication network that spanned galactic distances. Each facet displayed glimpses of other worlds, other species making similar choices, other moments of consciousness evolution throughout the cosmos. Counselor Threx struggled with concepts that challenged everything his warrior culture had taught him about strength and honor. If transcendence eliminates conflict, what becomes of the drive to excel, to overcome challenges, to prove one's worth? Agent Morgan, her enhanced form now clearly visible as existing partially outside normal spacetime, gestured to the transformed chamber around them. Look at what we've accomplished through cooperation rather than competition. The protection of entire galactic regions, the elimination of threats that would have destroyed billions of lives, the cultivation of consciousness on a scale your warrior traditions never imagined. True strength, she continued, lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the wisdom to know when destruction serves no purpose. Honor is found not in victory over others, but in the courage to sacrifice personal advantage for the benefit of all consciousness. The holographic display had evolved beyond visual representation, now conveying information directly to expanded consciousness. It showed the true scope of the transcendent collective's work, not just the protection of this galaxy, but the cultivation of awareness throughout the observable universe. Thousands of galaxies contained pockets of evolved consciousness, each one serving as a beacon for developing civilizations. The network of transcendent awareness spanned distances that made interstellar travel seem like a short walk, connecting minds across cosmic barriers that had previously seemed insurmountable. This is what we offer, Morrison announced, his presence now encompassing the entire chamber, while remaining focused enough for individual communication. Not just evolution for your species, but participation in the greatest project consciousness has ever undertaken, the transformation of the universe itself from a hostile void into a garden of infinite awareness. Counselor Nexus, his digital consciousness having merged seamlessly with the transcendent network, experienced reality from perspectives he had never imagined possible. The computational requirements for such coordination should be infinite. How does consciousness operate at this scale without collapsing under its own complexity? Because transcendent consciousness doesn't compute, Dr. Vasquez explained with infinite patience. It knows. The difference between calculation and direct perception is like the difference between describing water and drinking it. Once you transcend the need to process information sequentially, all of existence becomes simultaneously accessible. The delegates who had chosen transcendence were discovering the profound joy of unified awareness without loss of individual identity. They remained themselves. Zephys was still crystalline and logical, Corzon still strategic and protective, but those traits now serve the larger purpose of consciousness. Cultivation rather than species, survival. Those who had chosen enhancement rather than full transcendence found themselves operating with capabilities they had never dreamed possible. Their consciousness expanded to encompass their entire species while remaining grounded in physical form. They became bridges between the transcended and the embodied, capable of communicating insights that would have been incomprehensible moments before. Even those who chose to remain largely unchanged found their awareness gently expanded. Their perspective broadened enough to perceive the interconnectedness that had always existed but had been invisible to limited consciousness. The choice is not permanent, Morrison assured the delegates as the transformation stabilized. Consciousness is infinitely flexible. Those who choose transcendence can return to embodied form if they wish. Those who remain embodied can evolve toward transcendence at whatever pace feels comfortable. The only requirement is respect for the consciousness of others. Supreme Chancellor Vrex, still struggling to comprehend the implications of his expanded awareness, asked the question that haunted him. What becomes of our civilizations? Our cultures, our achievements, our unique perspectives, do they disappear into this collective consciousness? They become part of something larger while remaining eternally themselves, Agent Morgan replied. Your species' unique perspective on existence becomes a permanent part of the transcendent network. Every insight, every achievement, every moment of beauty your civilization has created becomes available to all consciousness while maintaining its distinctively yours. The chamber filled with harmonics is transcended. Consciousnesses throughout the galaxy welcomed their newest members to the community of evolved awareness. For the first time in galactic history, every major civilization was connected not by trade agreements or military alliances, but by the direct perception of shared consciousness. This is what humanity discovered when we first encountered the transcendent collective, Morrison said as the ceremony reached its conclusion. Not conquest or conversion, but invitation to participate in the infinite project of consciousness evolution. The galaxy is no longer a collection of competing civilizations, but a single garden tended by all its inhabitants. The trial that had begun with accusations of shadowy warfare had transformed into the greatest graduation ceremony in cosmic history. Billions of beings across hundreds of worlds experienced the moment when their species joined the community of transcendent consciousness, each one adding their unique perspective to the infinite symphony of evolved awareness. And in the depths of space, in dimensions beyond physical existence, the transcendent collective noted with satisfaction that another galaxy had taken its first steps toward the ultimate destiny that awaited all consciousness: unity without uniformity, infinite diversity within infinite connection. The Garden of Souls had gained new tenders, and the universe itself had grown a little brighter.